My name is Natalie, and I was 15 the night my mom beat me, shoved me out the front door, and threw me straight into a blizzard while screaming that I was no longer welcome in her house. It wasn't the first time she blamed me for something I didn't do, but it was the first time I understood she could actually throw me away. Snow whipped against my face, thick and violent, the kind that burns more than it freezes. My cheek still throbbed, her fingerprints still stung against my skin, and the taste of blood coated the inside of my mouth. My jacket was too thin, my hands shaking so hard I could barely close the zipper. Behind me, the door slammed, and her voice sharp, final sliced through the storm. "You're not welcome in this house." I didn't scream, I didn't beg. I just whispered, "Okay." Turned my back on everything I had ever called home, and started walking into the white, roaring dark. That night, I thought I had lost my family forever. I didn't know yet that stepping into that blizzard was the first move in burning their whole world down and the first step toward finally finding my own. Before I tell you exactly how everything unfolded, tell me, where are you watching this from, and what time is it for you right now? It helps to know I'm not alone as I open this door back up again. I didn't always know my place in that house. Or maybe I did, but 15 was the year I finally learned to name it: scapegoat, the extra piece. The child who could be blamed, bent, or broken to keep everyone else comfortable. If you want to understand how a mother decides her daughter deserves to be shoved into a blizzard, you have to understand the world I grew up in, the rules, the roles, the quiet hierarchy carved into the walls long before I ever learned how to speak. My dad was the soft one, the kind who called me kiddo and brought home gas station souvenirs from every state he drove through: keychains, magnets, a tiny snow globe from Utah that I still keep. He was a long-haul truck driver, sometimes gone for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. When he was home, the house felt lighter, like it finally had room to breathe. But he was gone more often than not, and the world shifted in ways he never saw. My mom, she was different. She worked at an office 15 minutes away, always dressed sharply, always watching other moms, other families, comparing, measuring, tightening her jaw whenever she saw something she thought we lacked. She was obsessed with the idea of a perfect family. Not a loving one, just a perfect one. The kind she could show off at church events, neighborhood barbecues, PTA meetings. She believed a perfect family ran like a machine, with clear roles and no deviation. My brother, Liam, was the star of that machine. 17, captain of the basketball team, tall, charismatic, the kind of boy adults adored instantly. Teachers let him get away with everything because he smiled right. Neighbors greeted him like he was a politician shaking hands. Even when he messed up, people joked about boys being boys. He was golden, literally. Clear skin, straight teeth, a confident walk. If he had a flaw, the world blinked and pretended not to see it. And then there was me. I wasn't broken, I just wasn't shiny. I liked quiet things: drawing by the window, plucking at a guitar with more patience than talent, staying up late learning basic coding tutorials on an old laptop Dad brought home from a pawn shop. I wasn't popular at school, but I wasn't hated either. I existed somewhere in the middle, which honestly was enough for me. But not for my mother. She'd look at me and sigh like she'd been handed the wrong child by the universe. "Liam needs calm, Natalie," she'd say whenever he slammed doors or acted out. "He's under a lot of pressure. He's the one with a future. Can't you just not cause problems?" That sentence became the soundtrack of my childhood. Didn't matter what happened. Didn't matter if I was involved or not. If there was tension, I was the easiest thing to blame. The pattern started small, so small I didn't even notice it forming at first. A glass vase fell from the counter one afternoon while I was upstairs doing homework. I heard the crack, ran down to see what happened, only to find Liam shrugging and Mom glaring at me like I'd personally committed a crime. She bumped into the table. "Mom." "No, I didn't." "Don't lie, Natalie. Why can't you take responsibility?" I stood there stunned, confused, heart pounding, trying to process how I was being scolded for something I literally didn't witness. Mom didn't look at me, she looked through me, like I was a problem she'd already solved in her head. Punishment was immediate. I lost my sketchbook for a week. A month later, Liam forgot to submit a project and got a low grade. I came home from school to find Mom standing in my doorway holding my phone. "You've been distracting your brother." "What?" "I barely talked to him all week. He said you're always chatting and playing music when he's trying to work." She didn't check his story. She didn't ask for proof. She took my phone, my laptop, even my colored pencils, since you clearly can't focus on academics. Liam leaned casually against the wall behind her, arms crossed, looking at me with that tiny half-smile. I would come to despise the smile that said, "I can say anything, and she will believe me before she even looks at you." I learned quickly that defense only made things worse. If I cried, I was dramatic. If I spoke calmly, I was cold and disrespectful. If I stayed silent, I was guilty. It didn't matter what I did, Liam always came out untouched. And he knew it. He started to weaponize it. Something missing? Natalie took it. Laundry not folded right? Natalie rushed and messed up my shirts. A teacher emailed home because he skipped class? Natalie stressed me out in the morning. Mom nodded through every excuse. "Of course, sweetheart. I'll talk to her." Talk meant lecture. Lecture meant grounding. Grounding meant silence and reminders that I was failing not only myself but him. My mom's love had fine print. Liam was the investment. I was the liability. The house felt like two realities playing side by side. When Dad was home, Liam behaved, Mom softened, and for maybe 48 hours we looked like any other suburban family dinner: TV, jokes, dishes. I wasn't treated like royalty, but at least I wasn't treated like a stain. Dad saw hints of the truth, but never the whole picture. He'd frown when Mom snapped too harshly. He'd pull me aside sometimes, whispering, "You know your mom expects too much. Just hang in there, kiddo. I'm back in 3 weeks." 3 weeks was enough time for a kingdom to collapse. And Mom never argued in front of him. She saved it all for when the front door closed behind his truck. My brother understood this better than anyone. He behaved angelically during Dad's weekends home, helped carry groceries, asked Dad about his trips, even pretended to help me with homework. And Dad, exhausted from driving through 3 states and sleeping in cramped cabins, wanted so badly to believe his family was fine. He never doubted the performance Liam put on for him. He never saw the smirk that appeared the second his suitcase rolled out the door again. In his absence, the hierarchy returned instantly: golden boy, enforcer mother, and me, the easy target to absorb blame, frustration, and any narrative that kept their world tidy. I used to tell myself it wasn't that bad. That all families had favorites. That maybe if I just worked harder, stayed quieter, got better grades, Mom would eventually see me not as a threat to Liam's glow, but as her daughter. But every year, the pattern cemented deeper. Every lie Liam tossed casually landed on me like a stone. Every punishment Mom issued without hesitation chipped something inside me. And every time I watched her beam at him bragging to neighbors about his basketball stats, college scouts, volunteer hours that I knew weren't real, I felt myself shrink a little more. I didn't hate my brother then. I didn't have space for hate. I had confusion, guilt, longing, and the desperate hope that maybe one day I'd be treated as more than the family's built-in scapegoat. I didn't know yet that love, in that house, had conditions. I didn't know yet that survival had a price. I didn't know yet that the lies he told the ones she believed would grow so monstrous they'd eventually shove me violently into a blizzard. But the truth is, everything that happened that night had roots in years of tiny, invisible choices, years of being unseen, years of being the problem, years of playing a role I never agreed to carry. And if you trace every thread back to where it started, it always leads to the same place: a mother who needed someone to blame, a brother who enjoyed the power that gave him, and a father who wasn't home enough to witness any of it. That was my family before the storm. Before everything cracked open. Before the night I finally understood what it meant to be disposable. And before the day my dad came home, saw the truth for himself, and lit the match that burned their entire world down. Winter always did something strange to our house. The cold made the walls feel thinner, the arguments sharper, the silence heavier. But that week, the week felt different from the start. Even before the blizzard warnings began pinging across everyone's phones, something icy and electric had already settled into the air. My mom moved through the house like a storm front, snapping at anything that dared breathe wrong. Liam walked on eggshells one moment and strutted like he owned the place the next. And me? I felt it. That creeping sense that the world was tilting towards something I couldn't yet see. The forecast announced a blizzard advisory on Monday, whiteout conditions, road closures, temperatures low enough to freeze skin within minutes. My dad called that night from 2 states away. "They're shutting down the pass," he said, frustration heavy in his voice. "I'm stuck at a truck stop until the road's clear." Mom didn't even pretend to be disappointed. She exhaled sharply, muttered something under her breath about perfect timing, and hung up. Dad tried calling me after, but my phone was already in Mom's possession, confiscated during another one of Liam's convenient stories about how I was distracting him from studying. By Tuesday, the tension had grown thick enough to taste. Mom's workplace had announced the possibility of layoffs. She spent breakfast scrolling job postings, aggressively stirring her coffee, snapping whenever anyone asked anything remotely normal like, "Do we have more milk?" Or, "Are you using the bathroom soon?" Meanwhile, Liam had received an email from the academic office. His GPA drop threatened the renewal of his sports scholarship. Mom looked at him like he'd personally wounded her. "Do you understand what this means for your future?" She'd whispered, voice trembling not from anger, but fear. Fear for him. Fear of losing the bragging rights she wore like jewelry. And Liam, always quick to read a room, always ready to weaponize a moment, placed a hand over hers and said quietly, "I'm trying my best, Mom. It's just hard to focus lately. With everything going on." Her eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, just long enough for drama, then sighed. "Natalie. She keeps fighting with me. Crying. Slamming doors. I don't want to say it, but it's been a lot. She stresses me out." I wasn't in the room. I heard this part secondhand, through thin walls, but I knew the script. I'd lived it all my life. And Mom believed him instantly. That evening, she grounded me for creating tension, though she never explained what that even meant. By Wednesday, the blizzard warnings had grown louder. Schools sent out early release notices. Neighbors stocked up on food. The world outside shifted into panic mode. Inside our house, things were somehow worse. Mom hadn't slept well in days. She paced the living room at night, muttering calculations, bills, tuition, groceries, worst-case scenarios. Liam's attitude fluctuated like flickering light, sweet one minute, smug the next. I stayed in my room, drawing to keep myself sane, pretending not to hear the increasingly frantic footsteps downstairs. Then came Thursday. The day everything snapped. The day the wind outside finally matched the storm brewing in our house. It started with a scream. A sharp, panicked sound that jerked me upright from my desk. I ran out of my room to find Mom standing in the hallway, holding an empty velvet box, the kind that usually sat on her dresser. Her face was drained of color. The family heirloom necklace, her dead mother's necklace, the one she polished every month and guarded like royalty, was gone. "Where is it?" She whispered the words at first, shaking. Then she turned toward Liam's door. He emerged immediately, face arranged in perfect confusion. "What's wrong?" "The necklace," she choked. "It's missing." There was a pause. And in that pause, everything inside me went cold. Because I saw the shift in Liam's eyes. The calculation, the opportunity, and the lie forming behind his teeth. "Mom," he said slowly. "I didn't want to say anything earlier, but I saw Natalie in your room yesterday. Your dresser was open." My stomach dropped. "What? No, and she was messing with my laptop," he added, layering accusation on accusation without blinking. Right before that anonymous message got sent to my school counselor. Mom's head snapped toward me. "What anonymous message?" Liam played innocent. It was an art form for him. Someone sent the school a note saying I was bullying classmates and using pills to stay awake for tournaments. Mom gasped. "What?" "I didn't want to worry you," he murmured. "But now with your necklace missing." His voice trailed off, but the implications struck like lightning. In that moment, he didn't just push me under the bus, he backed it up, drove over me again, then blamed me for the tire marks. "And Mom, Raw from fear and stress, didn't question a single thing. Not the lack of evidence. Not how little sense it all made. Not the fact that she, a grown woman, had just accepted her son's story about her daughter committing theft, hacking, and anonymous sabotage in a single breath. She just snapped. Natalie. Her voice cracked through the house like a gunshot. I stepped forward slowly, heart pounding, unsure whether I should run or stand my ground. What happened? I asked, though my voice barely worked. Don't play innocent with me, she spat. Where is the necklace? Why did you touch his laptop? Are you trying to ruin this family? I didn't touch anything, liar. The word hit harder than any slap could. And then the slap followed anyway. A sharp sting exploding across my cheek, sudden enough that my vision blurred. Outside, the wind howled as the first wall of snow slammed against our windows. The blizzard had begun. Get downstairs, she demanded. Now! I couldn't think. Couldn't breathe. I just moved, legs trembling, heart pounding down the stairs, toward the living room where Liam stood watching, expression carefully neutral. But I saw it. That flicker. That quiet satisfaction. That sick, twisted sense of triumph. The storm outside was growing violent, rattling the house, screaming through the eaves. And inside, my mother's storm was matching it blow for blow. Mom dragged me into the living room like I was a criminal. She'd finally cornered. The storm outside had begun to batter the walls, snow slashing sideways across the windows, but the real tempest was standing 3 feet in front of me, hair wild, eyes blazing, breath sharp enough to cut. She slammed the velvet box onto the coffee table so hard it bounced and tipped over, the empty interior gaping like a missing tooth. Then she grabbed Liam's laptop from the counter and threw it beside it, the screen flickering from the impact. Loose papers, printouts of the anonymous report the school counselor had forwarded, fluttered to the floor like wounded birds. There, she said, her voice low and shaking. Look at what you've done. I blinked at the objects, confused, scared, desperately searching for some thread of logic that would make this scene make sense. There was none. I didn't do any of this, I whispered. I don't even know your necklace was missing. Stop lying. The scream hit me harder than the blizzard winds pounding the house. You tried to ruin your own brother's future. Do you understand that? His scholarship, his college applications, everything he's worked for. She took a step closer, jabbing a finger toward my face. Are you jealous? Is that it? Jealous he's going places while you're... Her voice faltered just long enough for cruelty to sharpen into precision. While you're nothing? Something inside me twisted. Not snapped, not yet, but twisted hard enough to bruise something deep. Mom, please just listen. Enough. She barked, slicing through my words before they even formed. I have listened to you your entire life. And all you do is create problems. You think you're smarter than everyone. You think you can lie your way out of anything. But this, she kicked one of the papers toward me. This is beyond pathetic. I tried again. Liam lied. He always lies. You know he. The slap came so fast I didn't have time to flinch. My cheek exploded in heat before I even registered her hand moving, the cracking sound echoing in the room. I staggered sideways, gripping the edge of the couch to stay upright. Tears stung at the corner of my eyes, not from pain, but from the shock that she'd actually done it, that she'd crossed that line. Mistake. She hissed, her face inches from mine. Ungrateful. Embarrassment. Each word was a blow of its own. Each accusation stripped something farther from me. I shook my head, unable to breathe, unable to form a sentence that wouldn't get torn apart. I didn't, liar. The second slap was harder. Not the kind meant to correct, but the kind meant to punish. To humiliate. Outside, thunder cracked rare in winter, violent in timing like the sky itself was reacting. I lifted a trembling hand to my face, feeling the burning outline of her palm. Mom, please. Stop calling me that. She screamed, and for a moment, there was something unrecognizable in her eyes. Not anger, not disappointment. Something colder. I will not be disrespected in my own home by a child who contributes nothing. You think you can sabotage your brother, your family, me? No. No more. She stalked toward the entryway, grabbed my thin jacket from the hook, and ripped the front door open. A wall of white slammed into the living room, wind shrieking, snow swirling violently, the cold so brutal it felt alive. She snatched a grocery tote, threw in 2 shirts, a sketchbook, and my toothbrush, nothing else, and flung it out the doorway. The bag vanished instantly into the storm. "You're not welcome in this house," she yelled over the howl of the wind. "Not tonight, not ever." I stood frozen. My breath hitched. My heartbeat became a drum in my ears. I waited just for a second for something to shift, for her chest to heave with regret, for her voice to soften, for Liam to step forward and say, "Mom, stop." For anyone to come between me and the doorway leading into a blizzard that could kill someone in minutes. No one moved. Liam stood halfway down the stairs, his face arranged in the perfect mask of faux concern. His hands hovered near his mouth, as if he were horrified, but his eyes betrayed him. A flicker. A sick shimmer of satisfaction. A quiet thrill. The kind only someone who had just won something enormous could feel. That was the moment I realized I was alone in a house full of people. Not because no one loved me, but because no one chose me. My mother's chest rose and fell violently. "Get out." I looked at her, really looked. The woman who held my hand on my first day of kindergarten. The woman who braided my hair. The woman who used to kiss my forehead before school. And now the woman who would rather send her daughter into a deadly storm than admit her precious son might be lying. Something inside me went still. A quiet, eerie stillness. Like the moment a fire stops crackling, not because it's dying, but because it's about to spread. "Okay," I said softly. Not shaking. Not crying. Just, done. I stepped past her. The wind stabbed through my clothes instantly, turning my skin numb, my bones hollow. The cold crawled into my lungs with every breath. I grabbed the bag already half snowed over, held it to my chest, and stepped into the blizzard. Behind me, the door slammed with a finality that felt like a birth and a burial at the same time. No goodbye. No hesitation. No one calling after me. Just the sound of the lock sliding into place. And the truth pounding in my chest with every step I took into the white, swirling void. My childhood ended at that doorstep. My family chose their golden boy, and I chose myself by walking away. The storm swallowed me whole. Snow pelted my face so hard it felt like sandpaper, and every breath carved its way into my lungs like a blade. My fingers went numb first, then my wrists, then the place where my sleeves ended and my skin was exposed. My shoes soaked through in minutes. The wind pushed me sideways, stealing my balance, stealing my warmth, stealing every last piece of the girl who had lived in that house. I don't know how long I walked, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 20. Time didn't behave normally in a blizzard. It stretched, warped, blurred. I kept my arms wrapped around the thin tote bag Mom threw at me and bent my head down to shield my face. "You're not welcome in this house." Her voice kept replaying in my ears, louder than the storm, colder than the air scraping the inside of my throat. At some point my vision wavered, and I stumbled against a snowbank, catching myself with hands so frozen I couldn't feel the impact. For one terrifying moment, the thought hit me. If I stop moving, if I sit down, I won't get back up. And then another voice broke through the panic, a memory, warm and steady, Dad's. "If you're ever in trouble and I'm not there, go somewhere safe. Don't stay where you're not wanted." I don't even remember how old I was when he said it. Maybe 9? Maybe younger. It was after a fight between him and Mom, one of the ones Liam pretended to sleep through while I hid on the stairs. Go somewhere safe. The phrase cut through the storm like a rope thrown to someone drowning. So I turned left at the corner, then right at the mailbox buried halfway under snow, and headed toward the only place that had ever felt remotely safe to me. Hannah's house, 3 blocks away. I didn't run, I couldn't, but I pushed through the wind with everything I had left. By the time I reached her porch, I was shaking so violently, I could barely lift my hand to knock. The porch light flicked on first. Then the door opened. Hannah's mom, Mrs. Rivera, stood there wearing pajama pants and an oversized university sweatshirt, cup of tea in hand. Her eyes widened the second she saw me. My bloodied lip, the red imprint across my cheek, the snow matted into my hair, the way my breath came in sharp, panicked bursts. She didn't ask questions. Not one. Her face shifted into something fierce and gentle at the same time. "Oh, honey," she murmured, pulling the door wide open. "Get inside. Now." The warmth hit me so suddenly I almost collapsed. Hannah appeared from behind her mom, eyes widening, hand flying to her mouth. "Nat? What happened? Oh my God." "Shoes off," her mom said, already guiding me toward the entryway bench. "You're freezing." My fingers were too numb to untie the laces, so she knelt and did it herself, slipping my soaked shoes off carefully. She grabbed a towel from the laundry basket nearby and wrapped it around my shoulders, then turned to Hannah. "Grab dry clothes. Something warm." Hannah sprinted upstairs while Mrs. Rivera led me to the living room. The fireplace was on, crackling softly. A blanket waited on the couch. Everything smelled like cinnamon and vanilla and safety. She sat me down gently, her hand hovering over my cheek without touching it. "Sweetheart," she whispered, a tremor in her voice. "Did someone do this to you?" My throat tightened. I wanted to answer. I wanted to tell her everything. But the words jammed in my chest, blocked by years of being told I was too sensitive, dramatic, making things up. So I shook my head lightly and whispered, "Just a fight." Mrs. Rivera didn't believe me, not even for a second, but she didn't push. Adults who cared didn't push. They read the signs. They filled in the blanks themselves. "All right," she said softly. "Let's just get you warm for now." She returned with a mug of hot chocolate, real hot chocolate, thick and rich, not the cheap powder kind, and held it in both her hands so I wouldn't drop it. Hannah came back with sweatpants, fuzzy socks, and her warmest hoodie. They helped me change in the downstairs bathroom, checking my face as gently as if I were made of glass. Mrs. Rivera took a quiet photo of the bruise forming on my cheek. She didn't explain why. She didn't need to. Just in case. When I came back out, she had set out a small first aid kit. She dabbed my lip with warm water, applied a bit of ointment, and brushed my hair back from my forehead. Her hands were so careful it made me want to cry again, not from pain, but from the softness. From the unfamiliarity of being handled like someone who mattered. "You'll stay here tonight," she said in a tone that allowed no argument. "We're not sending you back out there." Hannah nodded firmly beside her. "My room, you take the bed." Haven't reasoned." I shook my head. "I can take the couch." "No," Hannah said, eyes blazing with that loyal, stubborn fire of hers. "My bed." We compromised. I took the couch, wrapped in too many blankets to count. As I settled in, Mrs. Rivera dimmed the lights, checked the lock twice, and whispered, "You're safe here, sweetheart. I promise." Then she stepped back, giving me space. Giving me breath. Giving me something that felt dangerously close to love. The storm raged outside, wind screaming against the windows. But inside the Rivera house, the world was quiet. Warm. Whole. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to Hannah wash mugs in the kitchen and her mom call her abuela to check the road conditions. Their voices blended together, gentle, steady, concerned. The kind of home sound that never existed in my house. And as the blankets weighed down over my body and the heat seeped slowly into my frozen fingers, a thought appeared, one so soft, so honest, it hurt. It was the first time I realized you could be safer in a stranger's living room than in your own bedroom. And for the first time that night, I let myself cry. Quietly, without apology. Without fear, someone upstairs would hear and blame me for it. The storm outside was violent, but inside, something new was beginning. Something like safety. Something like hope. Something like the version of family I never knew existed until the night mine threw me away. Morning came slowly. The way mornings do after a night that feels like the end of the world. The storm was still roaring outside Hannah's windows, but inside, the Rivera house smelled like coffee and toasted bread. I woke up disoriented, wrapped in blankets that weren't mine, feeling safer than I had any right to feel. For a few seconds, I forgot what had happened. Then the bruise on my cheek pulsed, and everything crashed back into place. But the real storm, the one that would reshape my whole life, wasn't the one outside. It was the one brewing miles away on the road, in a truck, with my father behind the wheel. Dad had tried calling Mom all night. She didn't answer. He assumed she was tired, stressed, or asleep. He tried me next, but my phone was still dead, still somewhere in a drawer where Mom had thrown it after grounding me earlier that week. When neither of us picked up, he felt something tightening in his chest. A feeling he'd learned to trust after years of working long hauls, of coming home to tension he could never quite name. He started driving before the roads were officially cleared, chains on the tires, headlights cutting through sheets of white, and headed back toward a home that wasn't as intact as he thought. He walked through the front door mid-morning, snow crusted on his jacket, hair wind-tossed, hands stiff from the cold. He dropped his bags and looked around. Something felt wrong. Too still, too clean, too quiet. "Where's Nat?" he asked immediately, scanning the living room. Mom didn't even look up from her coffee. "She ran away." He froze. "What do you mean ran away?" Liam appeared at the top of the stairs, voice perfectly rehearsed. "She freaked out last night. Started throwing things." Mom tried to calm her down, but she went crazy and ran out into the storm. Dad stared at them, stunned. "And you didn't call anyone? Look for her? She's 15. Mom scoffed, folding her arms. "After what she did to your son? After she tried to sabotage him? Steal from me and lie about it? No. I'm done chasing her. She wants to leave? Let her. Hand." It was the same dismissive tone she always used, but something about it cracked open a space in Dad's mind he hadn't allowed himself to look at before. A daughter doesn't just run into a blizzard. Not unless something much, much worse happened first. He stepped closer, voice tightening. "What exactly did she do?" Liam opened his mouth, spinning the story he'd been polishing all night. "She was hysterical. She shoved me. She grabbed Mom's jewelry. She blamed me for everything," each lie delivered with polished innocence. Dad didn't speak, but his jaw kept ticking. Little details weren't adding up. Mom's casualness. Liam's smoothness. The convenient timing. The fact that both of them had the same story, word for word. And then, because life has its own cruel sense of timing, the doorbell rang. It was their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Porter, bundled in 3 scarves and holding a grocery bag. "Oh, thank God you're home," she said, breathless. "I didn't know how to reach you. I saw your daughter last night." Dad stepped forward. "You saw Natalie? When?" Her face softened with worry. "Right when the storm started. I saw her outside, crying, and your wife was yelling something at her. Something like," she hesitated, eyes flicking to Mom, "You're not welcome in this house." "I tried to call out to Natalie, but the wind, she was gone before I could reach the porch." My father went completely still. Mom's face blanched. "She's old." She misheard. But then the next blow landed. Because Mrs. Rivera, Hannah's mom, had been trying to reach him too. Dad's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Mr. Natalie, your daughter is with me. She came to our house during the storm last night with bruising. She's safe. Attached are photos. Please contact me." He opened the images. My cheeks swollen and red. My lips split. My eyes puffy, terrified. My clothes soaked through. Liam's fake story evaporated. Mom's excuses died on her tongue. The silence that followed was not like any silence he'd ever lived through. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't shock. It was realization. A slow, agonizing, devastating puzzle clicking into place. All the little things he'd missed. All the times I'd downplayed fights. All the times he'd heard me start a sentence with, "Mom said," and then swallow the rest. All the times he'd told me, "Just hang in there until I'm home." He had left me alone with a woman who tore me down piece by piece. He had left me in a house where my brother learned cruelty as fluently as language. He had left me with people who didn't choose me, not even once. His shoulders straightened, not in anger, but in something colder, steadier. Resolve. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He didn't demand explanations. He just grabbed his coat again. Mom rose to her feet. "Where are you going?" "To get my daughter." His voice was low. "Dangerous. You need to calm down," she snapped. "You're emotional, you're not hearing the full story." He turned, meeting her glare with a look she'd never seen from him. I heard everything I needed to. It died in Ada says. For the first time in their marriage, she was the one who backed up. He walked out the door without another word. When he pulled up in front of the Rivera house, he barely made it to the door before it opened. Mrs. Rivera stepped aside instantly. And there I was standing near the living room doorway in borrowed pajamas, hair damp from a shower, cheeks still swollen. I froze when I saw him. His face broke. Not in anger. In heartbreak. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, and wrapped me in his arms so tightly I felt his whole body shake. "Oh, baby." His voice cracked, the sound of a man who realized too late how wrong things had gone. "I am so sorry I wasn't here." Something in me, something brittle and scared, finally let go. My fingers clutched the fabric of his jacket, sobs ripping through me before I could stop them. He held me like he was trying to shield me from every storm that had ever touched my life. "Dad," I whispered, shaking. "She threw me out. She really." "I know," he said, pulling back just enough to cup my uninjured cheek. "And I promise you, sweetheart, this ends now." His eyes were no longer soft. They were fire. Controlled. Focused. Unmovable. And behind them, a storm far more dangerous than last night's blizzard was beginning to form. Because my father had finally seen the truth. And he was about to burn their whole world down. Dad didn't waste a single second. Not one. The moment he pulled me into the passenger seat of his truck, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and thanked the Riveras for taking me in, something in him shifted from devastated father to decisive protector. The kind of protector who'd spent years seeing pieces of a puzzle he couldn't quite assemble until now, and once it clicked, he moved like a man who'd been preparing for this moment longer than anyone realized. Our first stop was the urgent care clinic. Not a hospital. Dad didn't want to risk running into people from Mom's job or anyone who might funnel information back to her too soon. He wanted records. Documentation. Proof. The nurse's face tightened when she saw my cheek. When she tested the range of motion in my jaw. When she gently pressed above my eyebrow, where a bruise had already begun to bloom. "How did this happen, sweetheart?" she asked softly. I hesitated. I'd been trained, after all, my whole life, to minimize Mom's anger, to not make things worse. Dad noticed the pause. His hand found mine. "Tell her the truth, Nat." So I did. The nurse's expression went from concern to something colder. She called the attending physician. Photographs were taken. Notes written. A report drafted. A mandatory one. Dad read every line carefully before signing. His signature wasn't shaky. It wasn't angry. It was steady, controlled, purposeful. When we left the clinic, he opened my door for me, something he hadn't done since I was little, and said, "This is step 1. Step 2 happened almost simultaneously, without him even needing to push for it. While Dad drove us to the school district office, Hannah's mom had already made calls. The school counselor, who had seen the anxiety, the tearful days, the unexplained missing assignments that weren't actually missing, alerted the district social worker. When we walked through the doors of the district building, the receptionist took one look at us and said, "We've been expecting you." We were led into a private meeting room. Warm lighting, soft chairs, a table with tissues that I immediately didn't trust. Social workers learned to read a room quickly. They scanned my face. The medical folder in Dad's hands, the exhaustion in his shoulders. And unlike last time, this time they didn't say gray area. This time they had medical evidence of physical harm, a severe weather endangerment report, a neighbor's eyewitness account, a doorbell camera video Mrs. Porter had forwarded, a text chain from Hannah's mom detailing the moment I arrived, photos of my condition, a pattern of emotional and physical neglect. It was no longer a puzzle. It was a case. When it was my turn to speak, my voice shook. I told them everything. Not in a dramatic way, just plainly, the way you described something you stopped realizing was wrong a long time ago. The scapegoating, the silent punishments, the favoritism, the lies, the threats, the slaps I always pretended were just accidents. The night she pushed me into the snow. "And you were outside. How long?" the social worker asked gently. "I don't know," I admitted. Long enough to stop feeling my hands. Her jaw tensed. And there were no attempts to contact you? No one reached out? No one looked for you during a blizzard? I shook my head. Dad didn't. He leaned forward, hands clasped tightly. Oh, she reached out, he said, voice low. She reached out by telling me my daughter ran away. And that she didn't care, because she was done with her. The social worker blinked. She said that? She did, Dad confirmed. She's been painting Natalie as a problem for years. And I let myself believe parts of it because I wasn't home enough to see the truth. His next words came softer. Breakingly soft. And that's on me. I looked at him, startled. But then his voice tightened steel, wrapping itself around regret. But what's on her, what she did last night? That's criminal. The social worker nodded slowly. We agree. It's not way, it's so more maybe. They explained the options. Immediate temporary removal of mom from my presence. Emergency protective custody. Mandatory separation until a court hearing. Safety planning with Dad. Formal investigation into mom's conduct. But Dad wasn't interested in half measures. I'm filing for full custody, he said. As soon as humanly possible. And your wife? The social worker asked. He inhaled once. Deep and controlled. I'll be filing for divorce. It's tentuverd. He looked at me when he said it, not with triumph or vengeance, but with a quiet certainty. A father who had finally chosen a side. Mine. And, he added, I want to be clear, my son will not be living under the same roof as Natalie again until a court deems it safe. The social worker wrote that down. But there was something else, something I didn't understand until much later, hidden beneath Dad's calm exterior. Because when the social worker asked about assets, housing, logistics, how divorce and custody might affect finances, Dad almost smiled. A cold, knowing smile. Everything critical is already in my name, he said casually. Or in the trust. The social worker blinked. The trust? Dad nodded. Set up 8 years ago. For who? She asked. Dad placed a hand on my shoulder. For her. I stared at him, stunned. He continued, tone even. My wife and son have always assumed we jointly own the house, the cars, the accounts, and the business. They don't. My wife has spending privileges. That's it. The trust owns the rest. He paused. And the beneficiary of that trust, the person who will inherit everything, is Natalie. The room went silent. I felt dizzy. I had known Dad loved me. But I hadn't known he'd planned for a world where I might need protecting. Where I might need a foundation my mother could never touch. Where I might need an escape hatch from the very people meant to love me. The social worker finally exhaled. Mister, that changes everything. He nodded. I figured it would. The social worker looked at me, really looked, and said, Natalie, you're safe. And you're not going back there. For the first time in my life, I believed those words. And as Dad wrapped an arm around me and guided me out of that office, I realized something. My mother had thrown me into a storm thinking she was ending my world. But she didn't know that my father had been quietly building one for me the entire time. And now? He was about to burn hers to the ground. The meeting wasn't held in our living room. Dad insisted on neutral ground. Too many lies live in that house, he'd said, and the social worker agreed. So we ended up in a small conference room at the County Family Services office, the kind with beige walls, uncomfortable chairs, and a table that looked like it had been assembled by someone who gave up halfway through. But the air inside that room? It was electric. Heavy. Waiting. Mom arrived first, coat pristine, makeup flawless, jaw clenched in the righteous fury of a woman convinced the world had wronged her. Liam trailed behind, hunched into his hoodie, but his eyes still flickered with that old arrogance, the belief that he could charm or talk his way through anything. They sat opposite us without a word. When Dad and I walked in, Mom immediately stood. I can't believe you're doing this. She snapped before the social worker could even sit down. Dragging our family into some spectacle. And for what? Because she, Mom, pointed at me, without even looking, ran away and made up a story? The social worker lifted a hand calmly. Mrs. Natalie, Let's take this one step at a time. We're here to review the evidence and establish a safety plan. Mom scoffed. Evidence? There is no evidence. My daughter is manipulative. She lies. She always has. You're letting him, she jabbed a finger at Dad, turn her against me. Dad didn't rise to it. He simply unzipped the folder in front of him and slid a small USB drive across the table. Funny you said that, he murmured. Because this is your voice. The social worker plugged it into the laptop. A doorbell camera clip appeared on screen. There she was. My mother. Standing in the doorway as the storm howled around her. Her hand shoved my shoulder. My body stumbled onto the porch. Snow swallowing my feet. Her voice sharper than the wind echoing into the night. You're not welcome in this house. The room went dead silent except for the faint hum of the old heater. Mom's lips parted. That's out of context. Dad's voice stayed steady. What's the context for throwing your daughter outside during a blizzard? Mom's mouth opened and closed, no words forming. The social worker clicked to the next file, photos of my bruised cheek, the swelling, the split lip. Then the medical report. Then a written statement from Mrs. Rivera. Then one from Mrs. Porter next door. Each page landed like a hammer. Mom's face drained of color. Liam shifted uncomfortably but still tried to look bored, annoyed, inconvenienced as if this were all some exaggerated fuss over a routine tantrum. Then the social worker spoke. Mrs. Natalie, the evidence here shows physical harm, emotional abuse, and endangerment. This is not a misunderstanding. This is not teen drama. This is a pattern. Mom slammed her hand on the table. You think I wanted this? She's been impossible for months. Running her mouth, making things up, attacking her brother. Dad calmly placed another sheet on the table. A printed screenshot. From Liam's phone. The text read, "Watch this. I'll make Mom kick her out again. She's so easy to manipulate." The color drained from Liam's face so fast he looked like someone had unplugged him. Mom's head whipped toward him. What is that? She choked out. More screenshots followed. Mom believes whatever I feed her. Nat's so dramatic, it's hilarious. I can make her cry in under 10 seconds. Not hacks. Not rumors. His own messages. The golden boy mask shattered. I was joking, Liam stammered. Everyone jokes. It was stress. You know how much pressure I'm under. It's not I didn't. The social worker's voice hardened. Mr. Natalie, these messages show targeted emotional abuse. This isn't a joke. This is deliberate harm. Mom was trembling now, her hand shaking as she pointed at Liam. Did you do this? Did you really? But the golden boy cracked. I didn't think she'd actually throw her out. He shouted suddenly, eyes wild. You're the one who always freaks out. I mean Nat's always making everything a big deal, everyone knows she's overly sensitive. Dad slammed his palm onto the table, the first sign of genuine anger he'd allowed himself to show. Don't you dare blame her, he said, voice like gravel. Not after everything you've done. Liam's mouth snapped shut. Mom looked from me, to Liam, to Dad, to the evidence glowing on the screen. And for the first time in my life, she had nothing left to stand on. No lies strong enough. No stories smooth enough. No golden child perfect enough. The narrative collapsed. Her world collapsed. Which is when Dad leaned forward, his voice low and devastatingly calm. Since you seem confused about the consequences, he said, pulling out a neatly stacked set of documents. Let me clarify. He set down the first page. Petition for divorce. Mom sucked in a breath. The second page. Request for full custody of the minor child. She choked. The third. Emergency protective order for Natalie. She covered her mouth. The fourth. Revocation of all shared financial access. All cards closed. Her name removed. Spending privileges terminated. The fifth. Notification to the school district about Liam's behavior and your physical aggression toward a minor. Silence fell as Dad spoke the final blow. You wanted to keep an image, he said softly. You wanted to live in a house where everyone believed your version of the truth. But I'm done protecting your image. From now on, His eyes sharp and cold, precise. I'm going to show everyone the truth instead. Mom shook her head violently. You can't do this. You can't destroy our family. You already did, Dad replied. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I just lifted my chin, my voice clear, steady, and finally free. You taught me I'm disposable, I said. Dad just showed me I'm not. Mom's face broke. Liam put his head in his hands. The social worker nodded slowly, closing her folder. The truth is on record now, she said. And the consequences will follow. 10-half, and Marjo. And in that beige, quiet room, I watched the world I had grown up in, the world that hurt me, silenced me, erased me, finally burned to the ground. Not because I fought, but because I survived long enough for the truth to catch fire. The weeks after the confrontation didn't feel like victory. They felt like stepping out of a burning house, smoke still clinging to your clothes, lungs still tight, legs still shaky but alive. Alive in a way I had never been inside that house. Dad and I moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy. The carpet was old, the heater rattled at night, and the view from my window was mostly the parking lot and a dying maple tree. But it was the safest place I had ever slept. No slammed doors, no shouting behind walls, no footsteps that made my stomach tighten. Just quiet. Too quiet, at first. Dad and I moved around each other awkwardly those first few days, like two people learning a choreography neither of us had practiced. He didn't hover, but he also didn't know how to help. He'd ask things like, "Do you want dinner?" in the tone of someone trying to assemble furniture without instructions. But he tried. That mattered more than anything. He cooked clumsy meals, too much garlic, noodles stuck together. He bought a used couch off Facebook Marketplace but forgot to measure it, so we spent an hour trying to angle it through the door. He scheduled a weekly father-daughter counseling session for us, and a separate support group for himself. I don't want to disappear on you again, he said quietly one night. I want to learn how to be the parent you deserved the first time. The old me would have shrugged. The new me just nodded. And something warm fluttered in my chest. Starting at a new school a month later felt like walking into a room full of mirrors. I kept seeing versions of myself I didn't recognize. Versions that didn't know how to trust. Versions that flinched at sudden noise. Versions that expected to be blamed for things instantly. I kept to myself at first. Sat in the back. Ate lunch alone. But life has a strange way of placing the right people in front of you at the right moment. For me, it was Miss Carter, the art teacher. She stopped by my desk after class one day, picking up my sketch of a girl standing in the middle of swirling snow. "You drew this?" she asked. I swallowed. "Yeah. It's beautiful," she said simply. "And painful. And honest. Would you consider joining the art and illustration club? We're putting together an exhibit at the end of the semester." No one had ever described something I made as beautiful before. I joined the club. Then the robotics team, after the coding teacher noticed how quickly I finished an assignment. Then the small after-school music circle that met in the cafeteria with mismatched chairs and a half-broken keyboard. Bit by bit, my world began to widen. I made friends not fast, and not all at once, but gently, slowly, the kind of friends who asked before hugging, who waited for me to speak instead of filling my silence with assumptions. For the first time since childhood, I didn't feel like a problem waiting to happen. I felt like a person. Therapy was its own kind of unlearning. It took weeks before I could say the word abuse without feeling like an imposter. Even longer before I stopped defending my mother in the middle of describing what she did. She didn't mean. It was stress. She was overwhelmed. My therapist would tilt her head gently. That may be true. But she still harmed you. Naming things was harder than surviving them. Scapegoating. Parentification. Emotional neglect. Coercive control. Trauma response. But each term was like unlocking a door in a house I didn't realize I'd been trapped inside. Every session, I learned something new. Love doesn't require self-erasure. You aren't responsible for anyone else's comfort. You didn't break the family. You survived it. You are allowed to take up space. And 42 has a video. Some nights I'd lie awake in my new room, staring at the ceiling, trying to absorb the truth of that last one. I was allowed to take up space. It was revolutionary. Then came the first real milestone. The art club announced a small scholarship competition, create a piece themed around resilience. I didn't plan to enter at first. It felt too vulnerable, too exposed, but Miss Carter nudged me gently. "Your story deserves to be told," she said. "Even if only through color." So I painted. A girl standing in a blizzard, snow whipping around her like claws, her face bruised but unbroken. Behind her, a faint silhouette of a figure reaching through the storm, a father's hand. Ahead of her, the first warm glow of a new dawn. I titled it, Weathering. It won first place. When they announced my name at the school assembly, I froze. I wasn't used to people clapping for me for something good. But when I stepped onto the stage, my eyes found one person immediately: Dad. Sitting in the front row. Wearing a button-up shirt he'd ironed twice, because he was nervous. His eyes were glassy. Not sad. Proud. Truly proud. Not proud of a trophy or an achievement he could brag about, not proud because it made him look good. Proud of me. For surviving. For creating. For becoming someone whole. After the assembly, he hugged me, not too tight, just enough, and whispered, "You're stronger than anything they tried to break you with." For once, I believed him. Life didn't magically turn perfect. I still jumped at loud arguments. Still froze when someone raised their voice. Still sometimes wondered if I was too much or not enough. Healing wasn't a straight line, it was a spiral. But each loop brought me higher, farther away from the history that once defined me. And in our small, quiet apartment, Dad and I built something that resembled home, not the version you pose for in family photos, but the real kind. Warm pancakes on Sundays. Driving practice in empty parking lots. Late-night movies on the couch. Shared apologies. Shared growth. Shared hope. I wasn't living in the shadow of a golden child anymore. I wasn't living under a roof where love had conditions. I wasn't responsible for holding a broken family together. I was just me, rebuilding, learning, breathing, and for the first time in my life, I could feel it. A future opening up. A life of my own choosing. A version of myself untouched by the winters behind me. A rebirth, not from fire, not from revenge, but from freedom. Freedom I stepped into the night my mother slammed the door. Freedom I held onto when the world tried to freeze me. Freedom I deserved all along. 5 years later, winter didn't scare me anymore. Not the way it used to. Not the way it did the night I walked into a blizzard with nothing but a tote bag and a burning truth in my chest. Now, at 19, almost 20, I watched snow fall from the window of my tiny studio apartment. The flakes drifted slowly, softly, like they had finally learned how to land gently. My apartment wasn't much. A single room with a kitchenette, thrifted furniture, a desk covered in pencils and watercolor palettes, sticky notes with half-finished ideas, a cheap but well-loved MIDI keyboard, and a growing forest of small houseplants I kept rescuing from clearance sections. But every inch of it was mine. Everything inside it was something I chose, not something chosen for me. I was now a first-year student at a design program I'd dreamed about since middle school. I worked part-time at a local creative studio, helping with animation drafts and layout prototypes. My days were full of things that once felt impossible. Safe mornings, laughter that didn't hide bruises, meals without tension, deadlines that weren't punishments, and friendships built on trust instead of survival. The life I built wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And it was enough. As for the family I left behind, their world didn't just crumble, it eroded slowly, piece by piece, as the truth did what truth always does, rise. My mother lived alone now. The divorce had finalized 2 years earlier, and when everything became public record, her behavior, the reports, the testimonies, the communities she had once ruled with perfect hair and perfect holiday cards began to keep their distance. She tried moving to another neighborhood for a fresh start, but small towns carry long memories. I sometimes heard updates through my father, sometimes by accident through relatives who didn't know the whole story. She lived in a modest rented duplex on the edge of town, working part-time, quieter than she had ever been. Some said she was humbled. Some said she was bitter. Maybe both were true. But she no longer had control over me. That was what mattered. Liam's fall was quieter. No one likes to watch a golden boy lose his shine, but consequences have gravity, they catch up eventually. He lost his scholarship shortly after everything came out. Colleges he applied to rescinded offers. Word spread faster than my mother could spin it. These days he worked part-time at a sporting goods store and was taking community college classes. Not out of passion, out of obligation. Every few months, he sent a short message. "I'm sorry. Hope you're doing okay. I miss how things used to be. Can we talk?" I never ignored him. But I didn't rush to meet him either. Healing didn't mean letting someone walk back into the same door they pushed you out of. And Liam had pushed. Hard. But he was trying now, fumbling. Slow, clumsy, trying nonetheless. People change. But only when they want to. And he wasn't there yet. Dad, though. Dad changed the most. Not instantly. Not perfectly. But deeply. He kept every promise he made that night. He went to his support groups. He attended family therapy with me until I felt steady enough to stand without it. He learned how to listen without fixing, how to ask without assuming, how to show love without smothering. Most importantly, he learned how not to disappear. Sometimes, late at night, he'd drop by my apartment with takeout and say, "I'm still learning, kiddo. I'm sorry it took a blizzard for me to finally come home for real," and every time, I'd smile and reply, "You came back. That's enough." We had both walked through fire to get here. We were both different people now. The last time my mother reached out was a month ago. She emailed me a long, rambling message full of half excuses and half apologies. Stress. Her own childhood, pressure. "Your brother was all I had. You know how dramatic you were. You misunderstood. You need to forgive me for the sake of family." But the final line was the one that revealed her still shifting mask. "Please let us reunite for your brother's sake." I read it twice. Then 3 times. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel fear. I just felt clarity. So I replied, "I believe you may regret what happened. But regret isn't the same as repair. I'm willing to talk, but only in a safe, neutral place with a therapist present. I won't return to the old house. And I won't pretend the past didn't happen." She never responded. But that silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was simply a door closing behind me. A door I survived walking through once. A door I never needed to walk through again. Tonight, as I stood beside my apartment window watching snow drift lazily past the streetlights, a small laugh rose in my chest. Dad sat on my couch behind me, working on a crossword he'd been stuck on for 20 minutes. 2 of my closest friends from my design program were sprawled on the floor, arguing over which indie band was criminally underrated. Someone had made hot cocoa my favorite, and the mug warmed my hands. Outside, snow fell. Inside, warmth lived. And the girl I used to be, the one who stumbled into a blizzard believing she was unwanted, felt a million miles away. At 15, snow was the weapon my family used to exile me. Now, snow was just weather. Nothing more, nothing less. I lifted my mug, watching steam curl into the air, and whispered into the quiet room. My dad burned their world down when he chose the truth over appearances. But the real revenge wasn't what he took from them, it was what I built without them. Sometimes the loudest fire isn't the one that destroys a house. It's the one you carry quietly, as you walk away, and never come back. The storm outside didn't frighten me anymore. Because I had already survived the worst one. And I had become my own warmth.